Okay, MrMostDaysOff, now we're ready for the TeePublic ad.
Head over to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly right now to support our show. Get yourself some Best Darn Diddly merchandise and help grow our podcast. I messed up there. Can I get another take?
Okay, just a second.
Out of the way, amateur. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to tpublic.com/bestdarndiddly. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to patreon.com/bestdarndiddly. Go to popthreads.com and save 15% with the discount code Simpsons. Hey, it's Krusty. Go to bestdarndiddly.com to get all your podcast needs from the greatest show on earth. Learn from a professional, kid.
All right, Krusty, we're ready for your take. Krusty?
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as MrMostDaysOff, and today we have a very special podcast about a very special episode. We're going to be talking about A Star Is Burns, which is a unique Season 6 episode that feels a lot like a Season 4 episode. But before we get to that and our guests, let me introduce to you, of course, your co-host with the most, Richie theWizKid. How you doing today, Rich?
I'm doing great. We get to talk about possibly the greatest film that you've ever seen on a Simpsons episode. I'm talking about A Burns for All Seasons, of course, the greatest movie I've ever seen.
Did that film
we got a
move
lot
you,
of other
Richie?
movies to get through. Oh, that movie really, it touched me, man. It touched me. It was fantastic. I love Mr. Burns. But we'll get into all the awesome movies in this one. I'll go ahead and throw it back to you. The man, the myth, the 40 rods to the hog's head. It is Miles.
And that's the way I like it, gosh darn it. So I mentioned this is a unique episode, and one of the most unique things about this episode is actually the DVD commentary, which was a lot of fun to listen to. You may recognize names that we usually talk about in Season 6, like Matt Groening and Dave Merkin, who were not present for that recording. Instead, we had voices from Al Jean, Jim Brooks, Jon Lovitz, the voice of the Critic, Gan Castellaneta, Susie Dieter, Ken Keeler, and our guest today, Mike Reiss. Welcome back to the show, Mike. How you doing today?
Always a pleasure. I love coming on, though I probably won't do it again.
Fair enough. I knew 2 strikes and we're out. That's totally fair. Well, Mike, you just most recently had your book Springfield Confidential, Jokes, Secrets, and Outright Lies from a Lifetime Writing for The Simpsons. And it seems like it is going smooth as butter, man. Everything we read is just positive review after positive review. It's been, 3-4 months now since the book is released?
Yes, it came out just about 3 months ago today. And I have real trouble handling this as kind of a neurotic Jewish man in that nothing has gone wrong. Everybody's happy with the book. The fans are really happy, which is all I really cared about. It's selling a lot, so the publisher's happy, and that makes my wife happy. And the critics were unanimously kind to the book. So it's just been a pleasure. And so yes, if you have any fans out there who are still listening, do buy the book. What I really am proud of in the book is that since I wrote it, and that's coming up on about 10 months ago, I finished the manuscript. Nobody's asked me a question about The Simpsons where I can't say, oh, it's in the book. It's in the book. Everything anyone wants to know is in the book. If you buy the book this second, you can stop listening to me because I tell the whole story of this episode in there. So that's the end of that plug.
We're just going to caveat that with please continue listening and then read the book. I mean, Amazon's great, but it's going to have to take at least an hour till it arrives at your house anyway, so you might as well fill the time somehow.
They can buy it while they're listening to the show.
They
you can do 2 things at once.
One click buy it right now on Amazon.com, and it'll be at your house by the time you're done listening to this podcast. It's guaranteed by Amazon.
Yes. You can download the free sample. One thing I really like is people go, I learned something in the first paragraph. In the first paragraph of the book, you'll see something you've seen 1,000 times on The Simpsons and never noticed before. So, that's something.
I know exactly what you're referencing, and I'm in the exact same camp. I had no idea, and when you wrote that joke, when you explained that joke, I was like mind blown. I also want to say another little plug for you. I've read your book, but I have not heard the audiobook version yet. And shout out to our friend Patsy the Angry Nerd over from the Throwdown Thursday podcast, because that's how he purchased your book, and he said it's absolutely fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I really, the book started off as I've been giving lectures about The Simpsons for 20 years. I've done 400 lectures in 21 countries, and that's where the book came out of. It's just I've heard every question everyone has about The Simpsons in every country, and I've had 20 years to kind of work out answers to the questions that are informative and funny. And so every joke in the book has been tested out in front of 40,000 people, including in Chile and China, where they don't even have The Simpsons. These jokes got laughs. So
and the old saying, if you can get laughs in Chile, you can get laughs anywhere.
That's the song. So yeah, I had to fight very hard to let me record the audio book. They wanted somebody, with talent. But I fought to get the book just because I know how to tell the stories, and the book works almost. The book is like sex in that it works almost better orally. So
from the man's mouth himself, right there, folks. That's amazing. So, like you mentioned, obviously for Simpsons fans, there's going to be a ton of information, a lot of stuff that you've probably heard, a lot of stuff that you haven't heard. And even the stuff that you have heard, it's coming straight from the source. So it eliminates that whole concept of, well, who really said this? One of the 14 people by their own math that made The Simpsons, created The Simpsons, is telling you directly these stories. But for me, I'm obviously a Simpsons fan, but I was also a fan of your other project, The Critic, which we're going to talk a lot more about today. And then another project we've already talked back when you joined us for Treehouse of Horror 5, Queer Duck, which was a project that I was not familiar with, that I was introduced to thanks to your book. And man, a lot of fun to hear about the stories you had with that show as well. But today we are, of course, going to talk about your other popular creation, Jay Sherman, voiced by Jon Lovitz, the Critic, which has a fascinating history on how this was created. And I know you've told this. It's even available, your lecture or Q&A, I don't know what you want to call it, where you've answered some of these questions about the creation of the Critic before. But this is such a fascinating story. I would like to revisit it a little bit, just so some of our listeners who may not be familiar with this get a chance to. This was originally pitched as a Krusty the Clown spin-off show. Do I have that correct?
That is the story, and that's the story I don't think has ever been told before. So you'll hear it today, and you'll get it in my book. So
you wrote a book?
Al Jean and I had finished running The Simpsons, or we were wrapping up after season 4, and Matt Groening came to us. He wanted to do an animated spin-off of Krusty the Clown. And so we kicked it around for a while, and we came up with this whole vision for the show, which was Krusty will be a single father living in New York. He's doing his show in New York now, and his boss is a crazy Ted Turner-like guy, and he'll have a sassy makeup lady who sounds exactly like Lunch Lady Doris.
Yeah, that's a great imitation the actress you got to do did.
So it's so unimaginative. Doris is, of course, Doris Grout, who wasn't even an actress. She was the script supervisor who used to time how long it took us to record a show. And so her voice was so funny and her attitude was so funny. We made her Lunch Lady Doris, and then we brought her over to the Critic and made her Doris the makeup lady. So again, a lot of heavy thought went into that. Anyway, so we had the whole Krusty the Clown spin-off show, and we took it to Matt Groening. He said, "Oh, I changed my mind. Now I want to do a live-action reality show about Krusty the Clown. We'll have Dan Castellaneta, live action, in Krusty the Clown makeup, and, we'll have him deliver a baby or work on a tuna boat." So
this is the part where it's just so ridiculous that I believe you, but at the same time, I know that it's this one's hard to swallow because I just can't imagine Dan Castellaneta dressed as Krusty going around in like the rise of the reality show era on television. Like, I guess was the idea, is to kind of get on that boat. But my God, that would have just been insane to see on a weekly basis.
It's the rare Matt Groening idea that never came off, because Matt, he's funny. He parcels out his ideas very slowly, and so I remember her second year in The Simpsons, I said to him, "What do you want to do next?" And he said, "I want to do future Simpsons. I want to do a future kind of animated show." And then it took him about 6 years. He did Futurama, and then he had one other idea lying around. He said, "I want Homer to get a pig, and the pig will get much bigger." And that wound up in the movie 13 years later. So that's it. So who knows? Life is long, and we may yet do the live-action Krusty the Clown reality.
Did Groening get into D&D like 5-7 years ago? Is that how Disenchantment came to be?
Disenchantment is the first idea. I don't know where it came from, where he got that idea. So, but again, usually you get about 10 years warning when something's about to come out from Matt. So anyway, he shot down the Krusty the Clown show. And then about 2 years later, Jim Brooks came to us and said, "I want to do a show about a young makeup woman who works at the Today Show." Now, Al and I, we didn't like the idea at all, but it was Jim Brooks. We said, let's try and make it work. And the more we thought about the Today Show, the only thing we really liked was a film critic, Gene Shalit, that kind of funny, crazy character. And so we just took Gene Shalit and then stole everything we had set up for the Krusty the Clown show and put it together in a pitch for Jim Brooks. And so suddenly it's Jay Sherman, a film critic, he's a single dad in New York, and he has makeup woman Doris and crazy Ted Turner boss. Mm-hmm. And he did. And again, you got to remember, this was going to be a live action show. And Jim Brooks had come in. He said, "Do you enjoy Jon Lovitz? I just saw him in a film called A League of Their Own, and he's very funny." And I was wondering if Jim had realized he'd already been on The Simpsons 4 times. No. So we love Lovitz. Nobody makes me laugh like Jon Lovitz. So we said, that's great. And then we did the stupidest thing professional people could do, which was we wrote a whole script for the Critic, again, live action, and then we called in Jon Lovitz and said, "You're going to do this as your next TV show." And John, who had just been a hit in A League of Their Own, said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm a movie star."
That was a good Lovitz.
So we were in a panic.
Yeah, it was.
You get that voice in your head when you work with him long enough. So he was funny, and he just wasn't going to do it because on the strength of A League of Their Own, he had 3 movies set up he was going to do next. And as he would later say, I did 3 movies, and I had 3 flops.
That's perfect.
And so anyway, so we had that meeting with Lovitz. He turned us down. He's walking out of the room, and literally just out of desperation, I said, what if it's animated? Then we can work around your schedule. And he goes, okay. And that was it. So that's how the Critic was born. And I've got to say, it's got to be the only animated show in history where deciding to make it animated was the very last decision made. But that was, and in hindsight, I don't know how we could have ever done it live action. It's just so full of cutaways and expensive movie parodies.
As I say, the movie parodies alone would cost a fortune live action.
Yeah.
which are some of the best parts of the show, by the way. I just revisited the series, and I love the movie parodies. They're always a treat.
It was fun. It was really, once that started up, might have been the most fun I ever had on the job. We really enjoyed it. Lovitz was funny. We had, of course, the great Maurice LaMarche. Everybody, it was just like a party every week recording that show. Everybody was screwing around and having fun, and we could write anything we wanted to. So it was a real pleasure up until the moment it got canceled 6 weeks later.
When you can see that in the show. I'm a big believer of when creators are having fun doing what they love, you can see that reflected in the final product, and the opposite of that is also true. And The Critic is just such a good time, even on some of the more darker and depressing episodes, which are always fun as well. But The Critic also has a real interesting history with networks. Simply put, it seemed like it was too raunchy for ABC, too clean for Fox, and then too early for the webisodes, which I had never seen until actually this past week, and oh my god, they're fantastic.
Oh, isn't that nice? Yeah, I'll take it through the history real quick. It was James L. Brooks, on the strength of The Simpsons, had a deal with ABC where ABC said, no matter what idea you come in with, we will make 22 of them. We will not say no. So we walked into ABC and said, we want to do an animated show about a film critic with Jon Lovitz. And ABC said, no. They just didn't want to do it. And we had to negotiate with them, and we talked them down to 13. And we made 13 critics for them. And we put it on the air, and we got great reviews, and we got really great ratings the first week. And then 2 days later, my secretary walked in with this giant box, and I go, what? I said, what's in the box? And she said, it's hate mail. and there's 2 more boxes outside, but they're too big to carry. So that was it. The ABC audience, which was a pure family audience in those days, just hated The Critic. They just hated it. And yeah, they thought it was much too raunchy. And ABC couldn't have been nicer. I mean, they were really good people. And ironically, ABC was run by a guy named Bob Iger, who became the head of Disney, who recently bought Fox. So he's my boss all over again.
Was ABC looking for a more wholesome family comedian like Tim Allen?
Yes, exactly. We were on before Home Improvement, and Bob Iger said, we're afraid you're going to ruin Tim Allen's reputation. And so I couldn't argue with him. He just showed us, he had one of those charts on the wall of the whole ABC schedule. And he said, where on this board do you see The Critic fitting in? And I'm looking at it, I go, there was no place for it. Maybe 3 a.m. on a Tuesday or something. And I said, the only place I see it fitting in is Sunday night on Fox after The Simpsons. And so again, it took a lot of negotiation, but we took the show from ABC to Fox to put on after The Simpsons. Now, The Simpsons, I guess this was around season 6, never had a good show to follow it. The Simpsons had this giant audience, and no matter what they put on after The Simpsons, 50% of the audience bailed on Fox. And I think they tried 8 different shows. So we come in with The Simpsons, and we came in with The Critic, and it was such a natural fit to put on after The Simpsons. And the president of Fox said, I love it. I can't wait to do this. She bought the show, and then she got fired 2 weeks later. And so a new president of Fox came in, and that guy hated the show. This guy hated the show. Now, in TV, you're never supposed to badmouth anyone because someday you might want to work with that person again. So I'm not going to mention this new head of Fox who replaced her, but his name was John Matoyan. I hate your guts, John Matoyan.
You heard it here, folks.
John Matoyan. Did I mention it was John Matoyan?
We'll make sure we put that in the description and everything. We'll even put a link to his bio.
Do we need to bleep that out?
The funniest thing about this guy is he took over as president of Fox, I had Fox just long enough to cancel the Critic, and then he left. He didn't do anything else. He canceled the Critic and replaced it with a show called House of Buggin'. So clearly that was his problem with the Critic, was there wasn't enough buggin' in it.
No disrespect to John Leguizamo, who I think is great, but that show was garbage.
Yeah, that was it. So John Matoyan left. I think he briefly went to Showtime and then never did anything again. So again, I always had this image of just Satan, sending up one of his minor demons, go and cancel the Critic. People seem to enjoy it.
Too much joy in our lives.
So we had a very short run. We came on Fox, I got to say, after The Simpsons, and we had great ratings. We had the best ratings of any show that ever followed The Simpsons, week after week after week. And then finally, I think after 10 weeks, Matoyan just said, I hate this, and he canceled it. So that was our short, happy life. It's 23 episodes total of The Critic, and I'm amazed people still watch it. They still talk to me about it. They want it to come back. I mean, it was 23 episodes 20 years ago, and in case you don't know how dated the show is, the first thing you see when The Critic comes on is a shot of the World Trade Center. So, just to remember another terrible disaster.
Wow.
I think the show shows on Reels or Crackle or something like that, but somebody has illegally downloaded every episode on YouTube, and they look great on YouTube. I mean, they look much better than our DVDs. So watch the show on YouTube. All 23 episodes are there, and I think our webisodes are there,
They
too.
are. That's where I was able to catch the
they are.
webisodes there, and those are great too. Which there's 10 webisodes, and from what I read, the only reason that they stopped was not anything to do with the popularity, but just to do with the financial situation that the animation or the webisode company was in. They basically went bankrupt, right?
That is correct. It was I'm going to back this up just a little because it was an interesting part of history. It was 2000, and there was the dot-com boom, and these internet companies made deals to produce content with everybody. There was a company called Pop that signed up Steven Spielberg and Ron Howard to make short movies for the internet. They made a deal with James L. Brooks to make short content for the internet. Everybody had these deals. Everybody took the money and did nothing. I've never seen it. Steven Spielberg clearly didn't have enough money. He took all his money for Pop. As far as I know, it never aired. There were only 2 schmucks in all of Hollywood who actually worked for the money, and that was Al Jean and me. We made these 10 Critic shorts. We got Jon Lovitz back. We got our whole cast back. We made 10 3-minute shorts. And the way they sold us on this, they said, look, when you did the Critic on TV, you'd write a parody of a movie, and it wouldn't air till 9 months later. And by that time, everyone's forgotten the movie. When you do it for the internet, a movie can come out on Friday, and you can have your parody up the next Wednesday. So we said, fantastic. And we wrote all these things. We recorded them all. And then this company, I forget what company it was, sat on them for a year. For a year, they didn't put them on. And we go, what are you doing? And they said, we're debugging them. So there's bugging again.
Bugs are the curse of the Critic.
Yes. So they debugged them. They sat for a year. So it literally took longer to get these shorts on the internet than it did to get them on ABC and to get them on Fox. So that was insane. That was really a ludicrous waste of our time. But as you say, I think the 10 Critic shorts are up online. They're a lot of fun too.
Right on. And so this went on for, I guess if you count the webisodes as a 3rd season, we could say there was 3 seasons of the show. And the transition from ABC to Fox was right between 1 and 2. Was it directly in between seasons, or is it mid-season?
Gosh, they were both. The Critic, I think, came on mid-season. It definitely came on mid-season on Fox. Just for completeness, I got to say, we were on ABC, we got canceled. We were on Fox, we got canceled. and we got an offer from the UPN. And we got an offer from a new network that it's not even a network anymore. It's long gone. But the UPN was a network that just showed wrestling. And they said, we want to do the Critic. And they said, but we want to do it without all the movie parodies and without so much Jon Lovitz. We want to focus on his son and his schoolyard friends and make it a kid show. And so I said, so you want to do the Critic without the Critic? And they said, yeah. And I think Al Jean would have done it. I think people were sort of interested, and I just said no. I said, I can't have the Critic get canceled on 3 networks in 3 years. So I put an end to that.
UPN at that time was doing hit show, or at one point was doing hit shows. I believe it was Michael Price worked on the show Homeboys in Outer Space that debuted on UPN. So I don't know if you made the right choice there, man. It could have blown up on that new network.
It could have, yeah. And ironically, yes, I didn't do the Critic there, and I did wind up working on Homeboys in Outer Space with Mike. There's 2 pages in the book about Homeboys in Outer Space. For anyone who's interested, it's fun just because this is something nobody believes, which is Homeboys in Outer Space. When it debuted, the LA Times called it the best new comedy of the year. And by the time the network, UPN, got done with it, it ended 17 episodes later, and it made the list of 50 worst shows of all time. So,
first to worst.
It's a wide spectrum there.
Yeah. It was a fun little journey.
So the episode of The Simpsons we're talking about today is A Star is Burns, which is a unique project for a lot of reasons. It's a really good episode. It's a highly quoted episode and a highly rated episode. But it is, in fact, a crossover event with the Critic, Jay Sherman, making an appearance at a film festival in Springfield. A lot went into this. I don't know if it would be better if there's anything you want to say before we jump into the episode, or if we should just go through it and you can talk as we go along. But I know that there is a lot of history just in the getting this made, even things like discussing the changes that would be necessary to make to Jay Sherman to fit in the Simpsons universe.
Yeah. Why don't you give me 5 minutes to just tell how it came about, because it's a pretty good story. And then I think I'll comment less as we go along with the show, because, it's a good episode, but I think the background is even more interesting. So here's the story. When the Critic was coming to follow The Simpsons, Jim Brooks said, well, let's do a crossover episode. Let's start off with the Critic coming to visit Springfield. And this used to be a real TV institution. You don't see it much anymore. But Jim Brooks had, when he created the show Rhoda, he had Mary Tyler Moore come over on that show. And when he created Phyllis, he had Rhoda come on Phyllis. And Mary Tyler Moore visited Phyllis. And shows Fantasy Island, they got a visit from the Love Boat. And the Beverly Hillbillies went over to Green Acres. And when I was a kid, this was the greatest thing in the world. You sort of thought, oh, wow, these TV shows all know each other and they're friends. It was just a fun TV institution. So James L. Brooks said, look, to do the Critic, why don't we have the Critic staff? They can do the episode where The Simpsons and the Critic meet, because, you got me and Al Jean running the show. We know how to do The Simpsons. So he had this idea, just a little piece of, classic TV production. And the current writers on The Simpsons said, we will not allow this. We won't let this happen. Now, mind you, it wasn't David Merkin. It wasn't the guy running the show. There was a guy who had just been hired 3 weeks earlier. Just the staff writer said, I can't let this happen. And there were three or four writers I had hired for The Simpsons the year before, and they put up a big stink. We can't let this happen. They're ruining The Simpsons. And so I went to Jim Brooks, and I said, there's a big revolt at The Simpsons. They don't want us to do this episode. And Jim Brooks, in one of his great lines, said to me, "When did this become a democracy?" And so we proceeded on to make that episode a crossover anyhow. We just did the episode on our own. And all the Simpsons writers who had fought the show had it in their contracts that their names would go on any episode called The Simpsons, and they would get paid for any episode. So we said to them, look, we're making this episode you don't want done. Do you want your names on it? And they said, oh, we sure do. And we said, and
of course.
Do you want to get paid for it? Oh, we love money. So their only contribution to this episode was fighting like hell to keep it from getting made. And I was a little bitter and resentful about it. But I got to say one thing in their credit. They were so hostile to the concept of the episode that Al and I and the Critic writers worked really extra hard to make it this great Simpsons episode and an episode that would stand on its own. They really goaded us to make sure it was sort of Critic proof, that it would be an episode people like. And I think it worked out. You know, I just watched it again for the first time in 15 years. I go, wow, that's a really funny episode.
There's a lot of great gags and a lot of good jokes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I talked just a little bit about the idea that Jay Sherman needed to be Simpsonized or Simpsonized. Between season 1 and 2 of The Critic, there's some changes made to Jay Sherman's appearance. Did that have any influence from The Simpsons or on the design of The Simpsons, or is that just a completely separate change?
It was two separate things. When we got canceled so quickly on ABC, Jim Brooks just jumped in and said, all right, well, let's fix what's not working. And one of the biggest things that didn't work on The Critic was just the look of The Critic. He looked like Frankenstein. His head, he had a sharp corner on the edge of his head, and he had tiny little pig eyes. And so we just softened the whole look of the show, gave him bigger eyes. We sort of filed down that corner of his head. So I think we re-recorded the theme song, which was written by Hans Zimmer. It's a beautiful theme song. We made a lot of cosmetic changes. And then when The Critic was coming on to The Simpsons, we said, all right, we got to Simpsonize him. So we made him yellow and gave him an overbite. It's very subtle, but he looks like everybody else on The Simpsons. And again, it wasn't that hard a thing to do.
No, they almost look like they could exist in the same world. I mean, it's not the same, but they're, it's still a hand-drawn animation show at that time, so it looks in a similar style. But definitely the little touches to make them fit in the Simpsons universe work out well. And speaking of The Simpsons, we are going to talk about A Star is Born today, which originally aired on March 5th, 1995. This is rare, I understand, from you yourself, that that when you and Al write together, you have a episode that cuts the opening credits down. There was no chalkboard gag on this episode. And the couch gag was the Simpsons run in, and they're in reverse size order. So Maggie's the biggest and Homer's the smallest.
Yes, I was surprised, too, to see there was no chalkboard. Al and I always covered shows way too short. We invented the long couch gag for The Simpsons, and it wasn't because we're creative geniuses. It was always because the show was supposed to be 22 minutes long, and we turned in an episode that was 17 minutes long. So I think there's just so much in that episode that there wasn't much room to cut, so we lost the chalkboard, which nobody ever complains about.
Yeah.
So this episode opens with an episode of Eye on Springfield, which is showing various things around town and a lot of in-between shots of women in bikinis. One of my favorite gags on this is we see a shot of a line of zoo animals going into the back of a Krusty Burger. With the other end, the front door has a line of people coming out with a smile on their face, eating fast food. Really, really good stuff.
Meaty goodness.
We see a lot of other various reasons that make Springfield not seem like it would necessarily be the most popular city in America. I particularly like when Skinner is being burned at the stake. I'm telling you people, the Earth revolves around the sun.
Burn him! I feel like this is a scary scene. I feel like this is a very important scene for today's society.
Let me jump in with two quick stories. One is Eye on Springfield, which is something we did, I don't know, maybe 4 times on The Simpsons. Was a direct parody of a show called Eye on LA. It was something that aired, I think, Friday nights in Los Angeles. And I mean, I have no idea what that Eye on Springfield looks like now, but it was a beat for beat copy of their opening credits and opening song. And it was a really cheesy kind of show that everybody watched. So that's where that came from. And then I think what kicks off the premise of this episode is a report that Springfield is named the worst city in America. And I got that from a news story that had come out a few months before we developed this, where I think they had chosen a city called, I think it was Yuba City, California, was named worst city in America. And I met people from Yuba City who were just flabbergasted. They go, gee, we like it here.
Those people were voted the worst people in America, though, so it kind of balances out.
So that's where it came from, is directly from just some little news story I saw.
So the worst city in America label makes Lisa a little bit concerned, but her father just takes a moment to count on one finger. One man, what is he to do? Marge decides that they should call for a town meeting soon, or they're not going to get any tourists at all. And I love Bart is immediately alarmed by this, because apparently he's been running a little side business selling maps to movie stars' homes. And I love, we see an Asian family beating on the doors of Moe's house, and Moe answers the door like half asleep, and they keep calling him Drew Barrymore, when Moe disclaims, "Get out of here, I'm hungover." "Oh, I'm so sorry, Miss Barrymore."
It's funny because she had alcohol problems.
I get it now. We cut to the town meeting where we hear Joe Quimby. "Are there any suggestions for how to attract more tourism?" And we get the first of many little jab jokes here at yourselves, of course, where Patty and Selma declare the easiest way to be popular is to leech off of the popularity of others. So we propose changing our name from Springfield to Seinfeld.
And then we do a little Seinfeld music at the end of that.
Yeah, you get that little riff that comes through, which is perfect. We get Bart doing a classic Bart prank where, he may just be a boy, but he does have an idea, and he wants to show a few slides. He claims that he's showing Springfield as it appears from space, but it's very clearly just a picture of Bart's butt.
And Quimby recognizes it. That was kind of
Young man, that appears to be a picture of your rear end.
So long, suckers! He has a great escape idea.
As I say, don't they get wrapped up in the picture itself and the slide itself, and it's like, I'll never take another suggestion from you, Milhouse.
Yeah. I think I don't remember the exact joke because Bart is showing his butt, and he says, "And over here is the Windy Valley." And
the Lost Dutchman's mine.
Right. It's pretty graphic kids' ass jokes.
Only get away with it in
animation. That's how we got Michael Jackson.
Oh, that's too good.
So Marge takes the stage after, she just stands up after Bart's prank, and she declares that she has an idea, and I love the entire town just immediately is like, "Oh, no, Marge is gonna suggest something." "I know you didn't like some of my past suggestions, like switching to the metric system."
Metric system's a tool of the devil. My car gets 40 rods to the hogshead, and that's the way I likes it.
The old person's remarks will be stricken from the record. That's such a good bit. That's the type of stuff that I personally just wonder, I mean, where does one come up with 40 rods to the hogshead, honestly?
That's just kind of the stuff writers know. The Simpsons writers know their funny volumes and measures. And it's the kind of thing we do with The Simpsons is we could have just written the line, but I remember we did the math. How many what is frogs to a hogshead? How does that work out? Just because we care about those kind of things. I want to interject one more thing, which is this town meeting was an actual town meeting we had in the town I grew up in. I grew up in a town called Bristol, Connecticut, that I would say is as much like Springfield as any town in America. And my town was, when there was a recession going on in America, and news crews would always come from all around to film Bristol, Connecticut, to show a town hard hit by recession. And it was, our mayor would always come out to get on camera. The chief of police was always on camera in these news footage showing us as a real rundown dump of a town. And so our town had a meeting. How do we counteract this bad reputation we're getting on the news? And all these ideas came up. And what they finally did is my town shot their own news program. It was a parody of 60 Minutes, I think, their version of 60 Minutes, with local people, the local shoe store owner debating the merits of Bristol, Connecticut. And I might have been 8 or 10 years old, and I got to see the movie they made, and I thought, this sucks. That's sort of the genesis of at least this whole meeting, the whole town meeting was my town did it, and did it just as badly as Springfield wound up doing it.
Did a man getting hit in the groin by a football win your town's film festival?
No, but it would have.
So that's exactly what happens at the meeting, is they decide that they are going to host a film festival right there in Springfield. And of course, they'll need to invite some movie critics or film critics to come and judge. But I do love that when the townspeople become receptive to Marge's idea, she immediately is like, "Oh, you like my idea? I do have some more." And they start chanting, "Don't push your luck." Good stuff. Good stuff.
She finally had her moment in the spotlight.
Just her 5 seconds of fame, really.
See, I thought that maybe the idea behind like some towns having film festivals come in to boost their tourism, like I thought that was just taken from real life, honestly. But I like knowing it's literally from your town meeting, and I guess Bristol did all right. Is that the same Bristol with ESPN nowadays?
Yeah, but that we may do another Simpsons episode about that, where I don't know what we mortgaged to get ESPN into town. But ESPN's been there 20 years, and I think they've brought something like $15 into the local economy. It really didn't help. Yeah. Right now, I'm the third most famous person ever to come out of Bristol after the guy who played Radar on MASH and this NFL player who murdered someone and then hung himself in prison. So I'm somewhere in that spectrum.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Somehow we just had a Merkin moment. But so we see the townspeople immediately start jumping all into this making their own film idea. Actually, pointed out on the commentary by you, I believe, we see Bart and Lisa shooting a film where Bart is parodying Criswell, the narrator from one of Richie's favorite movies, Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Woohoo!
Yeah, that's a real subtle reference. I was amazed we did that when I was rewatching the show, but that's where we went.
Basically, Bart in a tuxedo in that manner just introduces Homer as his film, The Eternal Struggle, where we see Homer struggling to put on a pair of pants.
Oh, the belt is buckled.
Relaxed fit, my Aunt Fanny. I love that. I also really enjoy the next film we see being made by the Flanders family, where we are essentially putting... Was it Todd or Rod is being bundled up and put down... No, Todd, excuse me. Todd is being put down in a basket down in the reeds, but he immediately gets caught by the river and starts sailing down. There's so much to love about this. I love just how absurd it is that every time Todd goes behind the trees, his screams are entirely muted. So it's like, ah! That gets me every single time.
That has stuck with me forever. I don't like that particular, the meat has just stuck with me. I don't know why, but I just love that so much.
I got to jump in real quick, which is because that gag is so beautifully executed, and Homer putting on his pants is so funny, and it's not much on paper, but the episode was directed by this woman named Susie Dieter, who was just, she may have been one of the first female directors in animation on TV, and she was just a genius. Everything she did was so great, and, you know, we wrote a lot of these filmic parodies in the episode, and everything was executed beautifully.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a beautiful sequence. And was it the belt buckle line cut too, which is tragic because I think that was in the deleted scenes on the DVD.
Oh, what's the line? I forget it.
The belt is buckled.
That's no, that's still
in
in
there.
there.
So I was watching it on the
FXX.
DVD, and the little cut symbol came up where it shows when you're watching with deleted scenes, a little thing pops up. But I must have been mistaken. I don't know. I must be tripping.
Maybe you're right. You know, I just know the episode from watching the illegal posting of it on YouTube.
Where you recommend you can see all of Mike Reiss's show. No, just make sure just make sure you buy his book legit, people, on Amazon.com. Use that Prime membership. I love as Todd is being swept away in the river, we see Ned, who essentially has like the red bat phone with God, essentially. Flanders to God! Flanders to God! Get off your cloud and save my Todd! And immediately lightning strikes from above, a tree falls and safely captures the basket. And we get a just from Ned to God, thanks, God!
I love Flanders' one before where he does the action diddly duddly doodly action jackson.
I love that God once again has 5 fingers.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I have no idea where that came from. I guess it was Sam Simon. I like that whole interchange between Flanders and God is, of course, just Harry Shearer talking to himself.
I believe we learned on the commentary back in one of my favorite episodes, Homer the Heretic, that was actually a legit animation error with the 5 fingers on God in that episode, and I believe it just stuck from there.
I love it. It's not true. It's a better
story, right? Do not let the truth get in the way of a good story. It's one of our mottos here on the Best Darn Diddly Review Show.
If you say so, yes, yes.
Well, we then see back at the Simpsons' home, Lisa and Marge are looking into film critics to judge the festival. Did you know there are over 600 critics on TV? And Leonard Maltin is the best looking of them all.
Ew.
And that's where we see, for the first time in Simpsons Yellow, Jay Sherman. Welcome to Coming Attractions. I'm your host, Jay Sherman. Thank you. I love Jon Lovitz. The way he does that thank you is just so brilliantly delivered.
He's so funny. I'll tell the story real quick how I met Jon Lovitz, which was, he came in, I think, for The Way We Was. His first appearance might have been Artie Zip, which I co-wrote, and I'm just sitting at the table before the table read began. I see a story in the newspaper. I said, oh, look at this. In downtown LA, they're cutting off people's hands just to steal their Rolex. And Lovitz shoves his big fat Rolex right in front of my face. He goes, like this one?
Wow. I imagine he's handful. He seems like a hilarious guy, but I imagine that he is a handful to work with at times, just because he's kind of like just some of the all-time greats from Saturday Night Live, where it seems like they're incapable of not being funny all the time.
Yes, he was funny because he would be ridiculous and crazy, and you'd be laughing, and then he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry," and you'd never know what he was apologizing for. Something like that. And Maurice LaMarche, of course, our great voiceover actor, who's done everything. He would also, at the end of every day, he'd call me up, "Oh, Mike, I just want to apologize." And it was like, for what? For showing me a good time? I never knew it. So these guys, I think, very wonderful talents, and it's surprising to see someone like Jon Lovitz, who just plays the world's greatest egomaniac, actually has this very tiny, fragile ego.
that's definitely an interesting comparison there. It's like night and day when they're on their off time almost. What I enjoyed about this episode, you touched on it earlier, is that Jon Lovitz has been on the show numerous times before, and yet you have this great surprise guest star, but it was like almost like it just worked perfectly. Like you could code it as something new, and it was something new because he's Jay Sherman. But I just love it because you never think about that as a child watching these episodes.
Yeah.
And we get the first real crossover moment with Jay Sherman as he reviews the new movie McBain. Let's Get Silly, starring, of course, McBain. This is a great sequence. We just see McBain and standing at a comedy club telling really bad jokes and then assaulting with various weapons any critics or hecklers, more so, that he gets from the crowd. I love the line where Rainier Wolfcastle is saying, "The film is just me in front of a brick wall for an hour and a half. It cost $80 million.
How do you sleep at night?
On top of a pile of money with many beautiful ladies." Good stuff. Good stuff.
Again, the funniest part, and again, this is all Susie Dieter, is just how lustily he shoots the audience, and he shoots them high, and he shoots them low. You know, it's all on a one shot, but it's clear he's killing every single person in the audience.
And he really nailed Woody Allen, too.
Oh, yeah.
Lisa's not sure how to feel about McBain, but she does know she really likes Jay Sherman. He's smart, he's sensitive, he's clearly not obsessed with his physical appearance.
My ears are burning.
Homer walks in, of course, and they're like, "Oh, I wasn't talking about you, Dad."
No, my ears are really burning. I wanted to see inside, so I lit a Q-tip.
There's so much to unpack there.
Really dumb joke. I never liked that. I hope you guys do. There's three jokes like that at least in the episode where somebody says something and it happens immediately. I think about 10 minutes later, Homer says, "Well, at least I know all the words to the Oscar Mayer Wiener song." And then Jay walks by singing the Oscar Mayer Wiener song. And it's like, I don't know. Those kind of things are all a little too convenient for my taste. But jokes are jokes.
Well, we close out this first act with Marge writing to Jay on behalf of the people of Springfield to invite him to come and be the judge of their film festival. I love it. We can it's doing the thing where Marge is writing and we can hear inside her head what she's writing. And we at one point hear Homer yell out, "Marge, is this a pimple or a boil?" And that actually ends up being written into the letter to Jay. We transition to Jay reading the letter. And he's kind of on the fence about leaving Manhattan until he runs into Wolfcastle, who is coming at him menacingly and just now realizing that Jay Sherman, in fact, was insulting him on the show.
And I love how he gets out of the situation, too. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, using all his brain power.
Hey, Nudnik, your shoe's untied. Genius.
From here they appear to be tied, but I will go in for a closer look.
And then, of course, on closer inspection,
these are loafers.
I had heard on the commentary again from you that this was actually ad-libbed by Dan Castellaneta in a temporary track.
It's an amazing thing. What a nice gift. And because people always ask, what did the cast ever ad-lib? And it's like, well, we love it when they ad-lib. And in this case, it was Dan Castellaneta wasn't even playing the part. I think Harry Shearer hadn't come in or he had left already. So Dan is just for temp recording all of McBain's lines. And we didn't have an end of an act. You know, we didn't have a big joke to go out on act commercial. And Dan just ad-libbed that and really saved us a lot of trouble. So I love him for that. It's a great joke.
I just love the shot of like him standing there from day until night. Plenty of time to escape.
We come back for our second act, and the Simpsons are picking up, or they're at the airport ready to pick up Jay Sherman. Though I love that Homer just can't quite grasp the concept of what to write on the sign, because he keeps writing Simpson over and over again, even though being told he should be writing Jay's name on it.
Yeah, that's a really funny joke. I would guess we haven't mentioned him at all. The episode is written by Ken Keeler, who's just one of the funniest, cleverest guys we ever had at the show. He's an old friend. He was my roommate briefly in college.
Oh, cool.
He's a scientist. He has a PhD in applied math and had a very good science career and then bailed on it, I think, first to write for Letterman. Then he worked for Dave Merkin on a show called The Edge. And then we hired him at the Critic, and then the Critic immediately got canceled, and he went to Simpsons, and then spent at least 10 years on Futurama writing some of their best episodes. So Ken is just really clever, and, to use the cliche, he thinks outside the box. So if that wasn't his joke, it's certainly the kind of joke he writes.
And he could definitely help you with the math on the 40 rods to the hogshead.
Yeah.
You could probably determine if it was a pimple or a boil, or in this case, a gummy bear. When we get Jay Sherman to the Simpsons home, we actually see Bart is watching TV, and I love this. It's another great little jab joke where, coming up next, the Flintstones meet the Jetsons.
I smell another cheap cartoon crossover.
And apparently this joke was pitched by Al Jean fairly late again from the commentary, I believe I heard.
Yeah, that was definitely Al, and it was really funny. And it certainly came out of, I think, the resistance we'd encountered making the episode. So we said, let's cop to it, and we copped to it, and then I think we copped to it again about a minute later.
Well, I love how you have Bart just literally saying, "Hey man, I really love your show. I think all the kids should watch it. Ugh, I feel so dirty." I also love that you actually, when we transition to Burns' office, we get a little Darth Vader music coming in.
Yeah, I don't know if we ever did that before. It's one of the best things about being at Fox is, Star Wars was Fox and we were Fox. And so we could get that kind of music cheaper than most people could get them if they could get it at all.
Way to use your resources. I mean, that's what it's there for.
I'll mention a similar joke from way, way back. I don't even remember which episode. It may even be like Father Like Clown, where it opens with a parody of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Bart is trying to steal money from Homer's.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, we've talked about that in depth. That's such a good opening.
So great. And Jay Kogan, Jay Kogan, by the way, is one of the people Jay Sherman is named after. Jay Kogan said to Jim Brooks, he said, we could really use the real Raiders of the Lost Ark music if we could here. And Jim said, well, I'll call my friend Steven Spielberg. And it's like, and that was it. So we got their real music that time too.
What a convenient friend to have. Yeah.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah. Hopefully he's got a touch, or he's able to touch base with Senor Spielbergo as well if he's in a pinch.
Oh, I'm going to jump in. I think when the Critic failed and we were finally leaving Gracie Films, we had a meeting with Spielberg. He wanted us to work at his TV division, whatever that was called. I forget. It was DreamWorks Television. And we found out, he was a big fan of the Critic. And he said, I watched the Critic last night, and you're holding back on Lovitz. I think you should let Lovitz be Lovitz. And I said, Steve, I think I know a little more about directing than you do. And the joke just played to complete silence. Everybody went dead quiet, and we walked out of the meeting. We didn't get the deal with Spielberg. But it was funny. He watched our show, and we mentioned him. I know the episode he was actually referring to, where he said, let Lovitz be Lovitz. We had a parody in the Critic of E.T. We had D.T., the drunken terrestrial. And so, I'm sure Spielberg, when he's watching comedy shows, just has to go, all right, here's another parody of me.
Well, yeah, at a certain point, it's just constant. The dude's done everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we actually get a good scene here with Smithers and Burns discussing that their profits are dropping mostly because of bad image. I love when Smithers tells Burns, market research shows people see you as something of an ogre.
I ought to club them and eat their bones.
So perfect.
I love all the dialogue in the scene from Mr. Burns. Like I just, the older I get, the more appreciative I am of all the comedy and everything he says. Like, it's so well done.
Yeah.
Burns is not going to stand for this, so he immediately calls for Steven Spielberg, and when he's not available, they get the non-union Mexican equivalent, Senor Spielbergo.
I think that joke came up in the room where we had the line, just get me his cheap Mexican equivalent, and I'm going to say it was me, but it probably wasn't saying that. Just go, oh, let's call him Senor Spielbergo. So stupid. Such a lazy joke, but people like that
Well,
one.
I've seen that pop up so much on like T-shirts and stuff lately. Probably knockoff shirts that you guys have no profits from whatsoever on all of those various T-shirt sites. But you see them pop up in parody accounts all the time, and now Senor Spielbergo shirts are constantly hitting my Twitter feed.
Ah, you're right. I didn't get any money from that.
After this meeting with Senor Spielbergo, where he wants Spielbergo to make him look like Schindler, essentially, and he's like, Schindler is bueno, Senor Burns is El Diablo.
Listen, Spielbergo, Schindler and I are like peas in a pod. We're both factory owners. We both made shells for the Nazis, but mine worked, damn it. Now go out there and win me that festival.
Burns is so good. And actually, this
Thank
next
you.
scene at dinner at the Simpsons home might be my favorite in the entire episode. I know I say that like 7 times per episode each week, but I'm trying to hold back. But we get a sequence where basically Jay Sherman and Homer Simpson both go over the last pork chop at the same time. Marge encourages her husband to let the guest have it, but Homer's still hungry. And we cut to, or kind of transition to under the table, where we actually see Jay and Homer's stomachs are growling at each other's like dogs. And it's so good. And it actually reminds me of something that you do quite a bit on The Critic, where we actually hear Jay Sherman's stomach having conversations with Jay a lot of times.
Yeah, that's the rare joke where we took one of our jokes and brought it to The Simpsons instead of kind of the other way around in this episode.
But it works really well, especially with Homer and him having this dynamic at the table, where the whole time it just does remind you of 2 dogs going after a steak or a pork chop in this case.
Yeah.
And then Homer's so soundly defeated by Marge.
I love that. I think it's Lisa calls him out, or doesn't call him out, just says, Mr. Sherman, I understand that you have 2 Pulitzer Prizes. And we get this sequence where he's like, oh yeah, but of course I don't carry him around with me. But as he starts to like take off his sweater and unroll his sleeves and all these things, he basically has all of the awards that he ever won on The Critic, or was said to have won on The Critic, start falling out, including his 5 Golden Globes he was carrying up his sleeve, and the Emmy that the dog was chewing on.
Yep. Yeah. And that was a nice little homage to The Critic, because we always played him as a Pulitzer Prize winner, and then in the first season we had him win a second Pulitzer Prize. So I like he has 2 Pulitzer Prizes around his neck, and that's what a Pulitzer Prize looks like. It's just a big round medal, and it looks like it should be full of chocolate.
That's actually one of my favorite jokes as I was rewatching on the Critic itself, when Jay's presenting at the Oscars and he realizes that all the Oscars are actually just chocolate filled. In the next sequence, we just see him coming out with a big smear of chocolate around his mouth. I got such a kick out of that. I also love what happens next, which is a rare moment where Homer gets beaten in a disgusting body function contest, I guess. Because Homer takes out this pretty impressive belch until Jay answers back with essentially what sounds like a foghorn. And I apparently this is an effect that I'm a little blank on the name. Marcel
Lamarche.
Thank you. He was able to do this sound effect somehow, some way. It wasn't actually a burp. It was just him in his magical voice.
That's it. We did it every week on The Critic, and it was Maurice did it, and nobody can match it. We've had a lot of big belches on the show, and that's something, and I'm pretty sure he's articulating it. He is talking a sound. It's an imitation of a belch rather than just belching a lot. So, but he won't tell anyone how he does it. That and his Orson Welles impression, will put his kids through college.
Cut to the next sequence where Marge has invited her sisters over to meet Jay, and Jay is very excited to meet Marge's sisters at first.
Ooh, sisters.
Yeah. He's being pretty charming. We see him on the couch. So then I said to Woody Allen, well, Camus can do, but Sartor is smarter.
So original.
I love how Homer tries to respond.
Yeah, well, Scooby-Doo can do, but Jimmy Carter is smarter.
And we just get the traditional tumbleweed just rolling across in silence. It's good stuff.
I mean, he's not wrong.
We have a really fun tie-in, I thought of as I was watching through today, because we have Patty and Selma wanting Jay to dish on who's gay in Hollywood. And Jay responds coyly, oh, I don't know, Harvey Fierstein. And, of course, Harvey is openly gay and has actually played many openly gay characters, including the uncle in Mrs. Doubtfire, who helped Robin Williams' character transition into Mrs. Doubtfire, and more notably, Carl from the episode Homer and Delilah from Season 2, which I thought there was a fun tie-in here to your book, Mike, because we actually had a special guest join us on the podcast when we reviewed Homer and Delilah, and it was actually Matthew Klickstein, the co-author of Springfield Confidential, which you should totally order on Amazon right now.
Yeah. Oh, please. Let's not turn this into a sales pitch. You can buy it anywhere. So the final layer of that is that Jon Lovitz, when he was on SNL, used to play Harvey Fierstein. That was one of his characters on the show.
Oh, wow.
Wow. What a fun. That's just all
It's
the way
all connected.
Oh, yeah. My God. More layers than spanakopita. Yeah, it's delicious.
Homer gets a really fun idea. He whispers to Jay, he whispers in Jay's ear, and the next thing we hear, Jay says, oh, and MacGyver's gay, which does not go over well with Patty and Selma. The next thing we know, we see Jay hanging from his underwear from the corner of the house, and Bart just coming by laughing. You badmouth MacGyver. We see Marge is working on a list in bed of who she wants to, that's going to sound weird, but who she wants to judge in bed. No, she wants people to judge the film festival, and she's got people on the list like Mayor Quimby and Krusty and Jay. And then Homer interrupts, and he's basically wanting to know if Marge respects his intelligence. There's this great scene where Marge keeps taking forever to answer. Homer is seemingly pleased by the answer, but then moments later realizes, hey, you took a really long time. I like this whole sequence. It essentially ends when Homer has his final break. Mike already mentioned it earlier, but Homer's like, look, I know I'm not witty like that critic, but does he know all the words to the Oscar Mayer song? And of course, Jay Sherman comes marching by with the Simpsons kids in tow, all singing proudly, I wish I were an Oscar Mayer wiener.
That's what Miles would truly like to be.
Homer's blown away. He's crushed because, I mean, that's it, Marge. He knows the whole hot dog song. Go ahead, sleep with them.
But he loves her enough to take a lock of her hair to remember her by.
Which I love how he cuts this like huge chunk of Marge's hair out, but it doesn't seem to affect Marge's hairdo at all.
I'll say, this whole plot line, we have a good episode. Springfield's having a film festival. Basically, that's enough to write a show about. And it was Jim Brooks, as he does, came in and said, we got to make this heartfelt and about character. And he introduced this whole plot line about, to make it this Homer story about, does Marge respect him and will he do the right thing in the end? Turns it into a personal tale of redemption. And that's what he does best. And that's, what separates The Simpsons, at least from everything that preceded it, like the Flintstones or something, was the idea just to come in with actual emotional stakes, even in a silly story, like this one.
It's from your book, but you even said it wasn't wrong. But Matt Groening does the art, Jim Brooks does the heart, and I'm blanking on the third one.
Smart, yeah.
There you go. Boom. Apparently that's not as true as it sounds, but it's a nice little quote you made there.
Yeah, I do. I put that quote in the book. I said, Sam Simon, if you want to know what everybody did on the show, here's a handy reminder. Sam made it smart, Matt gave it art, and Jim Brooks brings the heart. I said, that's a handy lesson to remember, but it's not true at all. And like half the critics in America just quoted the first half. They go,
As
yes,
they do.
They do.
Well, we see that the rehearsals for Mr. Burns.
Well, wait, first we have to talk about the judge that Marge had to kick out so that Homer could get in.
Oh, yes,
Just
please.
a little nobody named Martin Scorsese. I mean, that guy probably won't ever go on to do anything.
It's pretty funny, too. Something like shows you, wow, he was famous 25 years ago.
Yeah.
The length of these careers, sometimes how these references hold up over, a generation, really.
Absolutely. All right, sorry, Miles. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but I did.
No, that's a great joke. I love seeing that we got Homer replacing Scorsese. It seems like a pretty unfair trade. With fantasy football season coming up, I feel like that's like trading like a punter for like a starting quarterback. We get a sequence where Burns is auditioning people to play himself. He has actors such as Anthony Hopkins, who gets wheeled out as Hannibal Lecter, essentially. William Shatner, who's all Kirk. And we get Bumblebee Man, who is muy bueno, according to Spielbergo. But Burns decides no one else will do. He's just going to have to play himself. And we actually go all the way to the film festival, where we see some of the townspeople's submissions, such as Apu, with bright lights, beef jerky, and it's just essentially Snake robbing the place while Wiggum is stuck in the hot dog roller. I've got problems of my own right now.
That's a really funny joke. It's Wiggum is being pulled into the hot dog roller, and he says, this is going to get worse before it gets better. This realization he's somehow going to be sucked through these hot rollers and a hot dog machine.
We also have a submission from Mo in Mo Better Booze, where Mo is dressed up with makeup and a tux and a cane. He's dancing on the top of the bar. Money gets you one more round. Drink it down, you stupid clown. Money gets you one more round. You're out on your ass.
Right.
Then he falls, but not on his ass.
Ow, my back.
He's doing Joel Grey in Cabaret, and there's a parody of a song from Cabaret. From anyone too young to remember that. So I like it because it's a parody of Cabaret, except the title is a parody of a Spike Lee movie. That's how we roll.
That's quite the juxtaposition right there. We next see the clear winner of the film festival, submitted by Hans Moleman, and Hans Moleman Productions presents Man Getting Hit by Football. Every Simpsons fan has seen this in meme form thousands of times, where it's Hans Moleman walking out in his front yard and taking one to the nads. Bends over in pain, and Homer dies laughing. He's ready for his vote. He knows who won this festival.
But this isn't America's Funniest Home Videos.
but the ball, his groin, it works on so many levels. Roll it again.
I gotta tell you, I think Mole Man knows his audience in Springfield. I mean, and clearly he's onto something, because at the end of the episode, he's winning, George C. Scott's version of that is winning awards, so he might have been onto something.
Spoiler alert. Yeah, it is funny. Everyone made these professional movies. Everyone did a good job. And of course, that's not how film festivals work. Movies made by locals. But the best thing, I think, of what made Football in the Groin famous is the noise it makes. It hits right in the nads, and it goes doink, doink. Pull the effect from Three Stooges. The Three Stooges sound effect library.
You know, Miles, I don't think our show can get any better than hearing Mike Reiss talk about the doink noise about somebody getting hit in the groin by a football.
Getting the balls. Yeah. This is the highlight of our podcast. It's all downhill from here.
My work is done here.
Next, we have a surprising film because it's by Barney, and man, it's so beautiful. It's in black and white, and it's got heart, and it's got Barney drinking a lot of beer and talking about his problems. It's this beautiful, this actually does look like something that would be submitted to a film festival for what it's worth by at least one person. This film is at Cannes every single year, I'm certain of it. But it's just Barney, and it's surprising because it's actually moving to Marge and Jay Sherman.
Yes, it was. I'll say that was really hard to write, and it was something it was all the writers sitting together. You know, we're trying to invent something really good, but still kind of funny. And we went till at least 1 a.m. just pitching ideas for Barney's movie.
Don't cry for me, I'm already dead.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds out why he was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly, finally.
I made a movie?
Something that always catches my eye with Barney is that I don't know why it sticks out in my mind, but he just reminds me of an adult version of Nelson.
Oh,
and it's just the color scheme. I mean, his clothes look similar to Bart sometimes in color, but other times Nelson, and his face just reminds me of adult Nelson. And I don't know if that was intentional or just complete coincidence, but it just always has perplexed me a little bit.
that is something we could steal. I think we could get an episode out of that. I mean, we've shown at least 4 different fathers for Nelson, but
that could be number 5.
yes, you don't care about money or credit, do you?
No, not at all. Just steal it. I'm gonna be the crazy old guy that said I came up with that, and no one will believe me. I'm totally fine with that.
All right, now I'll go into work with that, and it was my own. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, maybe after you pitch that idea, you might also tell them about this new podcast you discovered. You know.
Have at it.
Yeah, we'll be honored. We, though, have one more film submission. Actually, Homer is sleeping through Barney's film, and Marge is getting pretty upset with him about it. But there's only one film left, and it's Mr. Burns. It's a Burns for all seasons. This does not go over well. Not even a little bit. Everyone is immediately turning on them. I love they get this sequence where Burns is like rallying the troops and declaring that he's going to close down American plants and bring them to Mexico, which makes Bumblebee Man and Toe very happy. But this immediately gets the crowd just turning on him. And
we get an E.T. reference again?
And worse and worse. He's E.T. at one point. He's Jesus at one point. It's pure egotism.
Right. The first scene in Mexico, I think, is a parody of the movie Viva Villa. It's a Marlon Brando movie. So I think it's 4 movie rip-offs in a row. There are 5, actually, because the first shot is, it's called A Burns for All Seasons. So that's a parody of A Man for All Seasons. But the opening credit, I think, is a parody of The Agony and the Ecstasy, about the painting of the Sistine Chapel.
Oh, wow.
So there you go.
Cool.
It's just nothing but references.
Yeah.
And it is a little funny, too, that people hate this movie, which, again, is really beautifully produced. There's something to be said for that.
It's definitely got the best budget. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I feel like you should have steered into the skit a little bit on this one, though. Maybe if you went the comedy route, people would enjoy it more.
Yeah.
Well, he's very confused afterwards. Smithers, are they booing me?
No. They're saying boo earns. Boo earns.
And I love when Burns actually asks, everybody is like, no, boo, except for Mole Man, who is, I was saying boo earns.
Yep. And that joke was written by a Critic writer named Tom Brady. And Tom Brady...
Of the Patriots fame, yes, we know him.
This is a different Tom Brady who, he's done a lot of things. He went on and it's written and directed films, but he knows that's what's going to be on his tombstone is Boo.
Boo earns. Yeah, you can't go anywhere where boos occur wearing a Simpsons shirt and not get that going constantly. So,
But you can't go places and say Boo earns and have a bunch of people stare at you blankly because they don't get it.
Well, you're not hanging out with the right crowd at that point.
I think for anyone younger than The Simpsons, it's a reference to, I think, Lou Piniella, a baseball player who would come out and the audience would go, Lou, Lou, but it always sounded like boo, boo. And the sportscasters always had to say, they're not saying boo, they're saying Lou. Did you know that?
Yeah, and now you have all the baseball stadiums actually doing the Boo Bird thing now from, I guess Miles would know this from wrestling, but the Astros do it, and it gets annoying watching those games sometimes.
I really love the next sequence starting out the third act because it's time for the jury, or not jury, that's a trial. This would be the judges. They're convening to just pick a winner. It's pretty split because Marge and Jay feel like the clear winner is Barney's movie, unfortunately titled Pocahontas.
Now again, 2 hours just to get...
Quimby and Krusty, however, feel a little bit differently. They vote for the Burns movie. I love Jay actually presses this. How can you vote for the Burns movie?
Let's just say it moved me into a bigger house. Oops. I said the quiet part loud and the loud part quiet.
That never gets old. Krusty fucks that up all the time.
I love how Krusty says he has a date with Eudora Welty, which Jay referenced earlier when he took the Belchy Award, that was the only other person that could belch like him. And then you hear the belch in this scene, and he says, "Coming, Eudora."
I got one more real obscure reference to throw in here, which was, he references her as another Pulitzer Prize winner. And so I remember we got out the World Almanac. Again, we're working pre-internet, and we're looking for the funniest name of a Pulitzer Prize winner. And one of the writers on the Critic who was in the room with us was a very funny guy named Richard Doctorow. And his father was E.L. Doctorow, greatest novelist of the 20th century. He wrote Ragtime, a lot of great, great books. And we're looking at the list and we go, well, it looks like E.L. Doctorow has never won a Pulitzer. And that became our joke. We used to make fun of Richard Doctorow for. It's like, your dad never won a Pulitzer. And of course, neither did my dad. Neither did anyone's dad. But that was a great way to taunt the guy.
Well, everything is falling on Homer's shoulders because the jury, again, not a jury. I don't know why I think this person's on trial, but the judges are split. It's 2 for Burns, 2 for Barney, 1 for football in the groin. Homer has to pick one of the other 2, and he needs some time to think because his brain is running a mile a minute. And we actually flashed inside Homer's head where we just see 2 monkeys, one picking a flea off of the other. That's about as fast as Homer's brain runs, I suppose.
Literally cleaning itself out there in a twisted way. So
yeah, that's fun. Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Homer's got some thinking to do, so he's actually really trying to get to work, and then we cut again and see that this time the monkeys have switched to doing calculus on a blackboard, so I guess it does up a little bit.
All right.
After a pep talk with Marge, of course.
I thought it was Jay that actually talked him into it.
Oh, it might have been. It was Jay, you're right? Yeah.
We got to tie the crossover in together, so Jay has a purpose.
True.
Has a function. Speaking of functions, the calculus on the blackboard is correct. Again,
of course it is.
I was going to ask about
that.
All the math in The Simpsons is correct. That's how we learn math. No.
Yeah, probably a math show with the occasional joke.
I don't have the author's name or the title of the book handy, so this is going to be the worst plug ever, but there's a new book that came out not too long ago about just specifically the math jokes in The Simpsons that I'm very interested in checking out at some point.
Yeah, that's a great book. It's by Simon Singh, and it's called
Awesome.
Mathematical Secrets of the Simpsons.
Thank you for covering on that. Yeah, I've been very interested when I learned of that book's existence. I feel like that's going to be a really fun, nerdy read.
Well, good. It came out 5 years ago, so I can see you're in no real hurry.
That's how quickly I am at reading. I just started. I'm still on like page 3 of your book, and I've been reading it for months. No. I did not realize it was that long ago. That is somewhat embarrassing, but I won't cut it. It's fine. I'll own it. Don't cry for me. I'm already dead.
Open mouth, insert foot.
Yeah, exactly. I'm good at that part. But so Jay has convinced Homer to really actually think about this, and it turns out he does, in fact, make the right decision. They voted for Barney Gumble, and Barney is at a point where he realizes that this is the moment that's going to change his life forever. He's going to sober up, he's going to really focus on his future, and everything's going to be different from now on. And that's when he gets his prize, a lifetime supply of Duff beer.
Huh? Just hook it to my veins.
And I love that the guy actually does. That's the best part
Yeah,
of that
they have
joke,
it
is
ready.
the person has a needle ready.
Neatly.
So it's time for the Simpsons family to say their goodbyes to Jay. Lisa says if she ever plays Carnegie Hall, that she'll give him a call.
And if you ever want to visit my show...
No, we're not going to be doing that.
Oh.
I like that. No, we're crapping on our show once again. Real quick side note, Simpsons did a crossover famously with Family Guy years later. And again, we just let Family Guy make the episode. And we at The Simpsons had no problem with it. We loved it. But I had heard Seth MacFarlane, a Family Guy creator, did have a problem with it because it's an hour-long episode of just crapping all over Family Guy and saying Family Guy ripped off everything they did from The Simpsons. And so we were
Seth.
And Seth at one point had to say, all right, guys, let's lay off a little. We thought of a couple of things.
Well, I'm sure you can speak to this in a little bit, but I feel like as myself, like the most fun I have with other people is when you're self-deprecating. Obviously, like I make fun of myself and other people laugh. So I can see where, especially when they can take a lot of inspiration from you guys, where if they quote unquote crap on themselves, they think it's funny, but they're also paying respect to you at the same time.
Yes, yeah. And always insult yourself before other people have the chance to.
Yeah.
Good
We call it the
advice.
M&M factor, I guess, these days.
So it's time for the Simpsons reset. Jay Sherman is off back to New York. Marge declares it was a lovely festival. The best movie won, and Mr. Burns found out that there are some awards that just can't be bought. Until 6 months later, when we cut to the Oscars.
And the Oscar goes to
I've got to win this one. I bribed everyone in Hollywood.
George C. Scott and man getting hit by football.
And we get an exact recreation of Mole Man's movie, only this time starring George C. Scott standing there in the exact same house, the exact same yard, the exact same football, and the exact same sound effect. Only we get him now. Oh, my groin! And that brilliant line is how we end the episode. A Star is Burns.
Right. Maurice LaMarche doing George C. Scott. He loves to do that. Ah, my grind. We might as well get to the last thing because it's the last moment in the show. The show is over. The credits come up and Matt Groening's name is not there. And this has been talked about enough and maybe a little too much made out of it. But Matt Groening just quietly took his name off the show. He didn't want to be associated with it. He felt it was an unfair plug for the Critic. And we didn't even notice. Nobody noticed. And it was someone in the mixing studio when they were putting the show together saw that and called the LA Times. And it blew up into a huge scandal that made the local papers. Matt Groening took his name off the show and he just said, I don't want to say anything good or bad about the Critic, but it's just not my show. And then James L. Brooks just attacked Matt. It was so sweet. He was defending us so much. And he called Matt a cuddly ingrate, which Pretty amazing term. And, again, it got a lot of press. I got to say, I was mad at Matt for maybe a year about it. And then who cares? Who cares really? And since then, we've done 6 more crossovers. I know Matt just didn't want to do this episode. And in fact, Al Jean just reminded me yesterday, he said Jim Brooks wanted to do 4 crossovers with the Critic. So think how mad that would have made.
Oh, wow. That'd been like 4 years of anger.
Yeah. So that was it. I mean, it's so far behind us. I think it was a passive move at best on Matt's part. It was not a mean guy, not confrontational. It blew up a little bit. It's a little bit of fun history, and it's partly just to get back to my stupid book. One thing I learned writing the book, I didn't realize till I was getting near the end was, there's no friction here. This is as much a reason people always want to know, why does The Simpsons run forever? It's partly because everybody gets along and everyone respects each other. And this whole story of the friction about making this one episode, which lasted about a day and a half, is really the last exciting friction we had at The Simpsons. There's been nothing to talk about for the next 25 years. So it's sort of nice that it's just such a very nice place. One other thing, in the credits, after you see Matt Groening's name not there, and one thing I like is Dave Merkin just stuck his name in there. He just jumped in. He saw a hole, so Dave Merkin's name is in that last credit sequence card. And then in the credits you see, and guest voices, Maurice LaMarche, Jon Lovitz, and Phil Hartman. And I forgot Phil Hartman is in the show for one line. I don't know why we did it. He comes in playing Ben-Hur because he did a really funny impression of Charlton Heston where he goes, "Truly this man was the king of kings." So really strange, funny use of Phil Hartman that I don't remember how it happened at all.
The one-liner. I want to ask one additional question about that whole controversy, if you even want to call it that. But I listen to a lot of the DVD commentaries. I listen every week as we do this show. And there was one thing that stood out to me on this particular recording. You were a part of it, so maybe you'd have some insight. I'm thinking maybe there might have been some direction from somebody to be happy and positive, because Jon Lovitz uses the word positive, staying positive, just to stay positive. He uses that term like 27 times in the 22-minute episode. So do you remember anything specifically about dealing with that? Was there more than a free lunch involved on this one, since it was kind of an unusual recording session? Yes,
absolutely. It's a great way to wrap this all up. The three of you still listening. It's just, years later, we're doing the DVD commentary on this episode. And, we're all telling the story. Oh, Matt Groening did this, and John Matoyan did this, and the Simpson staff were real jerks about the whole thing. And we record the whole commentary. And at the end, Jim Brooks goes, "That was just terrible. We can't do that. We can't. That's so mean." He said, "Let's wipe it." And we've never done that in history. We just erased the whole commentary track, and he said, "Let's be more positive this time." And so he did it again from the top, and we're all being positive, and Lovitz is making fun of positive. But then Jim Brooks starts talking about John Matoyan, the head of Fox, and he gets mad all over again. So it's pretty funny. Any of these guys who dig deep into Simpsons lore, maybe they can find that original commentary track, because it was just brutal. It was so ugly.
Get to it, nerdlingers. We want to hear
it. Maybe it was like a cleansing moment for everybody. Just say it and move on and get it out of your system.
Yeah, it really was. It's nice to say those things.
Fascinating. Wow. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us here today. This was an awesome conversation. It was so much fun having you back on the show. Is there anything else, and please include a plug for your book in on this, but is there anything else you want to say about this episode or about the Critic in general before we part ways today?
Only that, the fans of the Critic have been so kind, and I hear it once a week. People go, they say, let's reboot the Critic. You know, we're rebooting terrible shows. Why not the Critic? And I know we could sell it to Netflix in a heartbeat. I hear it all the time, mostly from Jon Lovitz. Suddenly he decided to do the Critic. He wants to do it live action. He says he hears it on his Twitter feed all the time. When is the Critic coming back? So maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it. It's a little hard for me. I'm a little resistant to it. It's, you know, Jim Brooks and Al Jean work 100 hours a week on the Simpsons. They got no time to reboot the Critic. I don't want to do it alone. And then there's a couple of sad aspects to it. I hate to end this way, but there's a sad idea. First off, there are no more TV critics. It was a good observation 25 years ago in this episode to say there's 600 film critics on TV. Now there's none. What Jay Sherman doesn't exist anymore. And so I've always pitched, if we do it again, he should be Mark Maron. He should just be doing a podcast out of his garage. But that's, you know, this, even when Jay Sherman was a success, it was a sad, sad show. And I think this would be really pathetic. The other sad thing is just, unlike The Simpsons, the Critic, half our cast is dead. The wonderful guy who played the boss, Charles Napier, is dead. Makeup lady Doris is dead. The sad one is the woman who played Marty, the son on the Critic. She passed away at a very early age. So that's it. I don't know if it's the cumulative shame of having worked on the Critic or some sort of exposure to Jon Lovitz causes you to go build a live. But that's another problem.
Wow. Well, on that sad note, again, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. It was a really good time talking to you. Rich, real quick, was there anything from your book that we missed?
My book messed up something again today, saying Jay Sherman's belch knocked the food off everyone's plates, but I rewatched that moment like 8 times, and that's incorrect. But it did cause me to notice that I feel like the Belchy Award, it was the mouth with the tongue hanging out, literally looked like Homer's mouth just taken off and putting on top of a trophy. So that made me laugh even harder at the fact that Jay overtook him on it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, he wins the trophy away from Homer. And it does, and it looks like Fat Off, too, the character made from Homer's muzzle in the Olympics show.
Oh, well, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But other than that, a great episode. I mean, we talked about it through the whole podcast. Everyone online and in the whole world, the Simpsons fans loves this episode. And I just want to say, Mike, thank you so much for coming on this one. Obviously, you're the perfect guest for this, and thank you for all the stories. You can hear some of the stories even more in this book that I hear.
Springfield Confidential. It's selling well, I think, partly because people think it's Springsteen Confidential. Okay.
Too late to return it, suckers.
This is the one book Barnes & Noble has a no-return policy.
Well, thank you again. That's going to do it for this week's Best Darn Diddly Review Show. Big thanks to Mike Reiss for joining us today. Thank you for listening to us. We appreciate you hitting that download button. The WizKid and I will be back again next week to review Lisa's Wedding. In the meantime, make sure you follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. Follow the WizKid at thewiz_kid23, and I am at MrMostDaysOff. We look back to being with you again 1 week from now.
Doink!
And until next time, be cromulent to each other.
My name is Patsy the Angry Nerd, lover of sharks and science.
This is Ashes Von Nightmare, the mistress of Merlot and real housewife of Transylvania.
And I'm Ancient Nicole, the Ironborn and Goddess of Giggles. Join us each and every Thursday as we discuss all the characters you love and love to hate.
That's right. We go in-depth in our discussions of origins, the things that make them unique, and their contribution to pop culture and society.
We also incorporate them into battles that showcase their skills and talents. All this, plus Patsy's Science Fact, the Von Nightmare Vineyard Wine Recommendations, Agent Nicole Files, and more each week on Throwdown Thursday. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at TD Thursday Pod. And we will see you next Thursday.